had a decent stack of supplements that I was taking at the time.
Okay.
And I feel like there was definitely some good thing happening with the supplement. I just wouldn't be able to tell you what was doing what or where any of it was coming from.
Yeah, you really have to like slowly add them individually to be able to tell like what is doing what.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which I'm bad at that. I'm not experimental in that way. I really like to just like change my entire life suddenly. Um and then I have no data.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think there's the default cultural bias towards like the scientific method and the idea of doing controlled experiments, but life is not a controlled experiment, and sometimes you got to change it all at once. Sometimes you have
Yeah.
to take the stack of papers and throw it all on the floor.
We also can't all be that kind of mind, you know? Like we can't all have that like naturally have that way of thinking ingrained within us. And I think that people who are like ready to like sort of like throw everything to the wind and like just change everything, try everything at the same time, like do tend to be like pretty creative. So, you know, those things have benefits and detriments.
Absolutely. I was just thinking the other day about how, like, from a cultural standpoint, if you have a culture where, like, you need to have a really solid, ironclad, rational reason to do anything, that culture is going to get lapped by a culture that acts on instinct and intuition, like,
Yeah.
100 out of 100 times.
Yeah, I actually think that that's like a huge benefit of American culture is that we're so like fuck it we ball culturally. And I think the older countries might look at us and be a little bit like that's so juvenile and like won't be sustainable, but it works for us. So
Yeah. Yeah, we'll start from scratch and we'll beat you, as they say.
yeah, exactly. So exclusion, when I'm thinking about exclusion, the first thing like I think we have to think about is how do we already know about exclusion and what have we been taught about exclusion?
We're definitely taught growing up in America that exclusion is basically like always wrong and kind of like the worst thing that you could possibly do is to not be inclusive.
Mm-hmm.
And that messaging, of course, is kind of at odds with like a lot of things about our culture and society. We actually have all sorts of exclusionary things going on, and that's very normal. That's baked into pretty much every human society ever in history. But as a cultural attitude towards just the concept of exclusion, we're taught that it's a bad thing. What about you, Shelby? What were you taught about exclusion growing up?
Oh yeah, I grew up in I grew up in the Midwest. So
Mm-hmm.
very more the merrier sort of mentality. The social dynamics, especially in like the somewhat affluent Midwest, are very like sort of people pleasy, protect your reputation, and make sure everyone feels included and invited, so that you will be included and invited as well.
Mm.
And so, yeah, there's like this sort of like baseless camaraderie that I think that I experienced, where it was like I wasn't quite sure why we were inviting people that we didn't like. And that inclusion felt a little bit like forced. I remember being in middle school and my class had a real clique problem. I
Mm-hmm.
went to an all girls school.
Many
So,
such cases. Oh, yeah.
yeah, yeah, I mean, especially amongst girls, like 13-year-old girls, you're going to have a clique problem in middle school. And so our whole teaching staff sat our class down and had a talk with us. And really, the talk was a result of one girl who couldn't really make friends very well and was struggling
Mm-hmm.
socially. But I remember walking away from that conversation and asking my mom, being really confused and being like, but these are just my friends. Like, Why do I have to be friends with people I don't want to be friends with? I'm just hanging out with my friends. So I think that's sort of my general attitude still towards groups and inclusion
Yeah.
versus exclusion. Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of funny to like think about even just like the sort of cultural values and attitude that could lead someone to say, you have to be friends with this person you don't like, or you're a bad person.
Yeah.
Isn't that kind of bizarre in in its own right?
It's pretty antisocial, in my opinion. And especially at an age where identity and discovering the self is happening sort of like all around you. Like you know, preteen and teenagehood is really like a self-discovery time. And to be told that like your intuition is wrong. In fact, you must be inviting people that you actively don't like into your circle out of social obligation and quote unquote niceness, which also felt like just like a lie to me.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think that inclusivity is perceived as nice?
I think on the base level, it does feel often good to be included in things. We like to be included in conversation. We like to be included in groups. Being included socially is kind of a core human like need, I would say. Some people are wired so that they can get along without friendship and companionship and social interaction, but those people are kind of outliers and very much, I would say, not the norm.
Uh-huh.
Um, inclusivity as kind of a cultural value, I think it leads towards people wanting to like feel morally good in a way that maybe isn't grounded in any sort of like concrete morality. It's like we don't really have a sense of like I don't know, respect maybe for the idea of objective morality. So you sort of have this kind of watered down, like, oh, everyone just be like kind to each other and include each other, and it's all going to work out, and all conflicts will be resolved by inclusivity and talking about them.
Yeah.
Um, and really, on the level of reality, a lot of conflicts can't be solved by talking about them. A lot of conflicts are based in a genuine like misalignment.
Yes.
You're talking about your friends in middle school and kind of being forced to like include people you don't like. I mean, that is a real conflict. You can't really fake your way around not liking someone.
Totally. Yeah. And it's really, I mean, I find it very unfair to the person who's being forced to be included. Um, I think there's like sort of a perception that you're doing that person a favor, but I don't really see pity as like favorable. And I also don't, I know lots of people who took a long time to discover the people that they align with, but because these groups that they thought they wanted to be a part of rejected them, they found the people that they aligned with a lot more fulfilling. And so I think you could be in shallow friendships and think that you feel fulfilled just because you have the illusion of belonging. But nothing ever compares to true belonging and true alignment.
Absolutely.
I was thinking about too just how natural exclusion is for human beings and for like all animals. There seems to be like some sort of like false assumption that animals are like maybe more inclusive than they are, like especially around like territory. I love that map. I don't know if you've seen this, but it's like sort of a meme, but it's like a map of wolf packs and how they organized particular territories in the US. And
Okay. I haven't
they
seen
have,
this.
okay, I'll see if I can find it, but there's very clear borders from where these packs operated. And I remember um, there was like sort of like a political discussion around borders for a while, and like there was sort of a claim that they were unnatural. And a lot of people used this sort of map as a means of showing that they are really natural in a lot of different species. And yeah, I feel very like connected to that. I feel very connected to, obviously there's less of a sort of primal instinct amongst humans to create these borders, although I do think it's like natural. And but I think it's based more on intellect and like a shared sense of belief and trajectory, right? That like we form groups who are sort of on the same mission together and like seeking the same things. Or for some people it's interest, although I think that interests indicate goals. And I think humans are much more interested in a shared trajectory than they are just on sharing conversation.
Absolutely. I think that vision of like what is a group of humans moving towards, like that defines a lot of the borders we draw, and it also just goes back to the like fundamental nature of reality, which is
Mm-hmm.
that we are born into a dangerous world. You know, life is inherently risky. It comes with the chance of death. Actually, not a chance, a guarantee of death. But we want to avoid that as hard as we can. And it's dangerous to go alone. So we form groups. And the thing about groups is that groups are going to be competing against each other. And groups are inherently dangerous to an individual. So that's why everyone has to either find a group or figure out how to survive on their own. And the
Mm-hmm.
latter is so disadvantaged that the group strategy and, you know, creating territory, creating borders, protecting yourself and your group is very much the dominant strategy.
Totally. Pulling on that thread, what else should we base our exclusion on? Because I think there is such thing as unnecessary exclusion, where people are just being mean.
Yeah.
Um, but I also think that there's very legitimate exclusion where we're selecting for a particular purpose.
I think exclusion is best when it's um, serving a like a genuine purpose. Like you said, it's not great if it's about meanness or moral superiority. C.S. Lewis, I was just reading this speech he wrote called the Inner Ring, which is about social groups and social dynamics and kind of invisible hierarchies. And we have so many formal hierarchies in life. Like we know that the president is above the vice president, is above a senator, is above a representative, and kind of so forth down. You know that your CEO is above your junior associate. Um, but there's invisible hierarchies all around us, and you don't know the rules of invisible hierarchies. In fact, they often don't have formal rules. Sometimes you think that you're in a position that you're not in an
Mhm.
invisible hierarchy. You might think that you're part of someone's inner circle and they don't feel that way about you. You might think that you're part of a club that you're not a part of, and
Mhm.
everyone in the club is kind of like, come on, man, like, really?
Yeah.
And this is the nature of invisible hierarchies, is that they're um, hard to read. They're
Mhm.
the rules aren't formal. And C.S. Lewis talks about these as kind of like a reality, you know, as an element of reality,
Mhm.
something that you need to understand and be aware of. But there's moral dangers to being exclusionary for the like purpose of feeling like superior to others. That's a very dangerous thing, and that can get ugly fast.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think so too. Um, yeah, I think that often is sourced from like power and desire for power. I see that especially amongst like young girls. I used to work at a summer camp and I taught mostly middle school girls. And then
Hmm.
obviously I was a middle school girl. And yeah, there's so much of like the sort of like mean girl mentality is so much more about power than it is about genuine like. I remember a girl who would just like bully me for the dumbest things. And I was really lucky. I was like a kind of unbullyable teenage or middle schooler.
Yeah.
Um, people would harass me, and I was pretty like I would just kind of ignore it. I was really not very fun to bully.
When you're not reactive, you kind of take the joy out of bullying.
Yeah, yeah. And this girl used to bully me about the dumbest things. She would like bother me about like the fact that our brothers were in the same grade, and she would be like, "Well, I can't hang out with somebody whose brother is friends with my brother." And I was like, "Who cares?" But she used to give me crap like that at school, and then she would like invite me to her house to hang out with her, just us, like one on one. And I like went a couple times. But it's really interesting to me that like there's lots of people in this world who exclude exclusively on the basis of power. It was very obvious to me that this girl did it in front of her friends as a means of like posturing more than it was an expression of not liking me. Um, and
Middle
so
school
I
girls are terrifying, Shelby.
they're relentless, dude. I mean, like, I think I've always like put more weight on my relationships with men. So, I I've just like always I hung out with my brother's friends when I was a kid. Like, I like being in the presence of men. And so I think I was sort of like immune to it in some magical way, where I really like I just was not bothered by this behavior. Um, but yeah, they could be really mean. But I think as adults and like, I mean, adults can also do this as a power dynamic sort of thing. But I think as like conscious and um, ethical adults, we have to be sort of careful about when we choose to exclude. And I think excluding on the basis of uh, genuine like alignment of values, and one must know their values to really be able to do this. I think that is like the highest, most like effective way to vet people is to really see how they talk about the world and compare with how you talk about the world, and not to like totally create an echo chamber for yourself, because that's also really dangerous. But to be able to say, like, this person is seeking the same kind of world that I am, and maybe we have different ways of finding that world, but we have a shared interest in shaping reality in the same way.
There was a tweet I saw about, we are here to create heaven on earth.
Mm.
And I thought that was a really beautiful idea. And it kind of implies like a shared vision, because people have different visions of what heaven looks like. And you want to be forming groups with people who have the same vision of what heaven on earth is going to look like for you. So that's a great like axis to base exclusion on, is if you want to create a life that is going to be like aligned with your desires and values, it's going to be so much easier to do that and so much more natural, and so much more solid to do that with a group of people who have the same shared vision.
Absolutely. I was going to say you have to know what your vision of heaven on earth looks like so that you can describe it to people or look out for when it's mirrored too. Because there's lots of people who say that they have a vision of heaven on earth, but it doesn't look at all the way that you think it should look or are interested in creating. And I think multiple heavens can exist in totally different ways. I'm like not really pro the idea of like every country needs to follow the same moral framework or the same, you know, political framework. I really think that like diversity of function based off of culture is actually really good for the world.
Absolutely. Different people, different places, different ways of living,
Mhm.
and let people kind of like sort into the things that are right for them. I
Mhm.
think we have in America, at least, it feels like this kind of like cultural obsession with like legislating morality from the top down and kind of like telling people like exactly how they're forced, how they should think and how they should act. And it's very unnatural because people just want to do what is right for them. And there's so much inertia and gravity towards like a person wanting to be free, wanting to speak freely and act freely and live freely. And that idea, I think, is kind of what America is like based on and what makes America, unique and great relative to other countries.
Totally.
Um, it's easy to take our freedom of expression for granted, but if you don't have freedom of expression, you actually don't have the ability to effectively organize um, meaningful social groups because you're not going to be able to find people with that the shared values and the alignment that's going to help you create heaven on earth together.
Yeah. Yeah, there is like this wonderful sort of self curation that happens through expression and open expression, where people talk about this online regarding like building followings on social media, that like being as honest and clear about yourself as possible can sometimes result in people unfollowing you. But in a way, you're sort of self excluding, or like you're allowing them to self exclude as a means of like sort of curating their feed, and you're ultimately getting a more aligned audience. So like them leaving isn't really a bad thing. It's just you're creating more room for people who are more aligned with you. And yeah, I think if we don't have that open expression, that can't happen, right? Things become very illusory, and we're unable to tell who believes what, or what the goal is together. Things become very sort of uh, foggy and unclear as to like why we're together, right?
Yeah. I think in America, we've had so much kind of like scolding and policing culturally over the past decade with just kind of the nature of like cancel culture and all these topics that people sort of have to walk on eggshells around. And I think the kind of end result of that is a lot of people just feel a ton of anxiety about their like status within a group and their security within a group. Um, because if you're going to get expelled from society for having like an opinion that maybe 70% of people have in the country, that fundamentally is going to make you feel unsafe.
Yeah.
Um, and that's a challenging thing to like deal with psychologically as an
Yeah. Well,
individual.
and the worst part is that often you're not quote unquote wrong, right? Like it's just a difference in point of view. And for some reason, that difference in point of view, when you're the minority, is becomes like sort of physically dangerous. Um, and in reality, you're probably just in the wrong place. But we're so
Or you're in
defensive.
the wrong time. You're early.
Yes, or maybe you're late too.
You could be
Um,
late.
you could
Yeah.
also be late. Um, yeah. So why else is exclusion good? Or do you and I in particular like exclusion?
I think exclusion it serves as this kind of like refining tool where if you are I'm just let's think about like habits and activities and how you spend your time.
Mhm.
There are so many things competing for our time and energy and attention. Infinite social media platforms with infinite content, video games, infinite sports, um, infinite like fun little trendy experiences. Escape rooms all left and right. Um, there is so much competing for space in your life. And if you don't exclude like kind of mercilessly, your life is going to get filled with a lot of crap that you don't really want to be doing. Um, if you don't exclude like physical belongings that don't bring you joy, your house is going to become cluttered and become a mess. Your life is going to just kind of like keep piling up and get gunkier and gunkier. And I think that kind of like visual metaphor of like, you know, a piston engine with all the like intricate little gears, you know, they need to be kept clean and organized in order to work effectively. And if you're not excluding things, there's going to be those gears are going to be getting gummed up and not work.
Yeah. I think that's a great sort of visual for the psychological state too. And the way obligation can sort of like creep into and erode our lives and our like sense of self. I find that people who are overly inclusive tend to have a very low sense of self and low clarity. And being in relationship with them makes me very unsure of where their loyalty lies. Because they're often more in favor of comfort, their own comfort and their own perception or others' perception of them, their own sort of like image, than they are on actually being creating an authentic life, creating like a life that reflects their internal. Is a huge issue that I have with people pleasers and being in relationship with people pleasers. I find it very unclear as to where they stand, and I find it very difficult to trust them, because when you're including everybody, when you're more interested in your own popularity than you are in being clear about who you are and who you're interested in and what you like, it makes other people around you like doubt your commitment to them. Or at least I find it very difficult to feel like, do you really like me? Because I know that there's a lot of people that you keep around who you don't really like. And could I be one of those people? So I think it actually creates a lot of doubt and confusion in the people that you surround yourself with when you're coming from that position.
Something I've realized as I've gotten, you know, older is just that a lot of things which aren't tested aren't truly reliable. And people pleasers are people who have not been tested in conflict. It's you can always count on a people pleaser to kind of pick the most frictionless response to a thing, the most kind of comfort maxing thing. And that makes them, yeah, maybe I don't want to say like fundamentally unreliable, but it makes your relationship with them not solid. You kind of have to like test how deep their genuine like care for you is in order to know that they're reliable and that they're not just going to you know, betray you for convenience.
Yeah, or you know, ultimately be so uncomfortable with the idea of conflict that they sort of allow you to take the blame for things that you didn't do. Like, I think there's a lot of situations where people who are conflict avoidant sort of seek out the, like you said, the most frictionless solution. And sometimes that can end up with a very outspoken and clear person ending up sort of like under the bus. And so, yeah, loyalty lines get really unclear when you're overly inclusive, in my opinion. How does openness fit into this? And because I think you and I are surrounded by a lot of people who would consider themselves high openness. And
yeah, we absolutely are.
And I love people who are incredibly high openness because I find them very easy to talk to. But I also think that there's a danger to being high openness. And so, yeah, how does that fit into exclusion and inclusion? And when is openness maybe dangerous?
Yeah, openness can really get you in trouble if you're open to the wrong experiences. I think that's the most dangerous aspect of openness is that a normal, like more conservative person, if a stranger, you're like, let's say you're walking, um, by the bridge at night, and a stranger pops out from under the bridge and says, "Hey, you want to have an adventure?" Um, Somebody who's really high on openness is like, yeah, that sounds fun. That sounds memorable. Like, when's the last time a stranger popped out from under a bridge and offered me an adventure?
Just in the name of openness,
Yeah.
purely.
Yeah.
No, like awareness of self or possibility, just in the name of openness.
And that could be a great adventure. It could also be something that completely destabilizes your life or, gets you killed. Um, so openness without that kind of like discernment of like, is this good or bad, is
Mm-hmm.
going to get you in trouble. I think openness is really refreshing to be around, though, because so much of society and culture is pretty closed off right now, it feels like. There's a lot of spaces where like free speech and free expression is pretty heavily policed, so people can't really like speak their mind or be relaxed. People feel like they're kind of scrutinized a lot, and I think a lot of public spaces, social media kind of exacerbates this, and like even like going to the club, like people are like worried about like getting filmed now and things like that, right? You can't really let
Yes.
loose and party in a sort of just like relaxed, authentic way. Everyone is like performing and scrutinizing at the same time, so that's a challenging dynamic to balance too. What
Yeah.
tell me what are some more dangers of like high openness?
Well, I was thinking earlier today, first off, that high openness groups aren't actually high openness, right? Because they're often vetting for openness, whereas there are plenty of people that they're not open to because those people don't identify as open. And so it's sort of just like, I don't know, it feels a little paradoxical to me to like call yourself a high openness group. There's like an inherent exclusion to like any group.
Yeah.
And that's okay. I think that uh, living under that delusion can be a little bit tricky and also a little dishonest by like sort of like self-describing as open. Um, I think these groups could probably find a better definition for what they're experiencing, um, which is maybe more willingness. Maybe it's not openness. Maybe it's like sort of willingness to like be exposed.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, to me, I think you have repeatedly hit the nail on the head with openness versus discernment, in that these people tend to be very concerned about being perceived as judgmental or even like experiencing being judgmental, when I think judgment is a very like healthy response to human interaction. And like we should not like judge each other based on our experiences, but we should judge each other based on our actions. And like we should have sound judgment in our I don't know, in who we decide to associate with. I think that's like very healthy and normal. Um, and so I think that my concern with it is that people will become so open that they lose track of themselves, that they become like unsure of what they stand for or why they're forming a group.
This is one of those things where I think we have to kind of like identify the elephant in the room and then shoot it, unfortunately,
Mm-hmm.
which is that there is a tremendous American, like in the cultural mainstream, a tremendous bias towards this idea that like non-judgmentalness is the highest like moral good, and that
Mm-hmm.
like being a non-judgmental person is what being a good person means. Um, and this sort of social conditioning really messes up a lot of people, I think. It really hits people hard and early, and they mold themselves in this kind of non-judgmental shape. And then they have all these experiences where they get hurt by being not judgmental enough. by being
Yeah.
open to things that they shouldn't have been open to, by trusting someone who was fundamentally and obviously untrustworthy. I This is one of those things. It's like you can tell very quickly in many cases whether a person is trustworthy or not. There's this idea that it's bad to judge a book by a cover. I don't think that's true at all. The way a
Me neither.
person looks and acts tells you a ton about them, and you should make judgments based on that. And that's not a bad thing, and it doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means you have a brain.
Yeah. And that's not to say, I love discovering reasons why people behave the way that they behave. It's like a hobby of mine more than anything. But like, I think that where the discernment comes in is the ability to say, yeah, I understand this person. I appreciate why they are the way they are, and they still just don't fit into my life. Like, my sympathy for them does not dictate their relationship to me, you know? And yeah, I think also it's just like most people can't live a non-judgmental life. I think there's lots of people who identify as being non-judgmental or high openness who aren't doing that at all, who aren't acting upon it. They just live in the identity of it. It's the same with people who identify as a good person. I have a real problem with people who identify as good people because when you have decided that that's who you are, I think you quickly lose track of what a good person looks like and how they behave. And like, also good is so personal as a judgment, and if you're not sure what measures good in your own mind, you can't hold yourself accountable to what that looks like. You just are calling yourself that for under no sort of like doctrine or clear agenda,
I think there are like objective goods in kind of like the moral fabric of reality, but you have to be like really in tune with that truth and not just imposing your own subjective sense of good on others.
Mm-hmm.
And quote unquote like good people, and I'm also going to throw out the word like empaths,
Mm-hmm.
are really really dangerous, specifically because as a good person you can do no wrong.
Yes.
A good person will do all sorts of harmful things to you because their consciousness has given them permission to.
Yeah.
They'll
Well, I'm
sleep
a
at
good
night being like, I
person.
had to do that. Like I had to like harass and bully this person because like of something they posted on Instagram when they were in middle school. Like,
Mm-hmm.
but that's how you make a good society, is by bullying people into submission, right?
Apparently, to some people. I
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it becomes like the ultimate excuse, right? You can do no wrong if you identify as a good person because
Yeah.
your actions don't actually mean anything to you. Your identity means something to you. That's it. Um and again, it's like becomes like immeasurable to these people. Um yeah, it's really dangerous. I
C.S.
think
Lewis said it would be better to live under a actual like robber baron, because a robber baron's greed can be satisfied, but a
ah
moral busybody, their capacity and their appetite is endless.
Interesting. Can you say more on that? Like can you say more on your thoughts of that?
Well, I think it's really about what drives people, and like a moral busybody, because they are giving themselves moral permission. Like they're going to be able to sleep at night
Mm.
despite being awful to people all day,
Mm.
right? And
Yeah.
it's that level of sustainability, I think, of evil is is what really makes the distinction between the two things.
Yeah. I like that. I'll have to read that. Where did he write that? Do you know?
I don't know what it was from. I'll send you the quote.
Okay, I gotta find it. I have to meditate on that. Um, so you personally, I feel like we've talked about this a lot. We both have like considered our personal values and like exclusion and what we sort of like vet for. What are you personally vetting for when you're creating a group, and what kind of people do you personally exclude, and what kind of people do you include?
So one of the things about groups, many groups just have like a natural like mission that they're working towards, and that makes it very, I think, kind of simple to decide like who is a good fit for the group and who is not a good fit for the group. Like if you're making a poetry reading group, the people in that group have to like poetry. They have to have poetry that they, want to read in the group. And somebody who is like really like mean is not going to be a good fit. No, like nobody
Mhm.
wants like a really harsh critic in like a amateur poetry group, right?
Right.
That is not the purpose of that type of event. Just like an open mic night. The whole idea of an open mic night is that you don't have to be good. It's
Yeah.
anyone can get in front of the mic and like share something that they've been practicing.
And
So
simultaneously, if you're creating like a high level poetry group, you have to be really specific about who you select for it. You can't invite
yes,
everybody, you know?
yes, exactly, and that's where things like start to get like a little more interesting and complicated, and you have to like really be like using your judgment and knowing what the purpose of the group is. Um, but the way I see it, if you have a like functioning high level like writers group with a bunch of really great writers in it and everyone's doing high level work and giving each other high level feedback, that is a rare and precious thing. And that is
Mm.
something that should be like preserved and maintained. And the integrity of the group, um, like many groups are actually kind of like only as strong as their weakest member, as the weakest link.
Yep.
And adding one or two wrong people into a group like that can actually just destroy it. And it's brutal because um, what happens in that kind of a dynamic is the people who were contributing the most to the group are just going to slowly and quietly withdraw from it a lot of the time. They're just going
Yeah.
to stop showing up because the value is no longer there. It's
Yeah.
very, very easy to destroy value, to destroy a good thing by letting a bad thing into it.
Absolutely. I love that you brought up art and creativity in reference to this because growing up in theater, I saw this a lot. Um, it was community theater, so in fairness, they were trying to be like kind to the children. But me being the competitive person I was, felt quite annoyed by the obsession with seniority instead of merit when it came to casting in our shows. And I found that it like really held our productions back from being as good as they could be because I felt that they were more interested in making people feel good than they were on sort of emphasizing their strengths or like really putting the people who were great in the spotlight. Um, and yeah, I think I have a problem with that in the arts in general. There seems to be a real comfort or obsession with supporting art for art's sake, being like, we have to support this even though we don't like it because we support the arts as a concept. Um, but people who are not within the arts won't support them if the art is bad. Um,
Yep.
they just won't. They won't care. And so I'm really pro this kind of curation and rigorous sort of like pressure to be the best at anything, at any sort of art form or like sport, and like having that competitive nature and not supporting things that people don't like um
Yep.
as a means of like preserving the integrity of the art itself or the practice itself.
I
Yeah.
want to ask you also about kind of like groups in your personal life, sort of like moving beyond these like mission driven groups, because it's easier, I think, to know like how to exclude someone from a mission driven group or a purpose driven group because you can you can feel when like the quality starts to go down, or when you're not building the thing that the group is supposed to be building.
Mhm.
But I'm curious about in your personal life, how do you decide like how do you decide who you exclude? Who gets to be your friend? Who gets to have access to you personally?
Oh God, I feel like maybe I'm not. I feel that like my life is somewhat a mission. So like the people I do surround myself with are sort of like also on missions. So that's sort of like the thing that I vet for is are people that have really high ambitions and are interested in creating, like you said, heaven on earth, like a world that is hopeful and excellent. I think I really look for people who are seeking excellence. And I'm totally okay with disagreeing on the way to get there. But like I have a friend who we have really different visions for what the perfect world looks like. But we both believe greatly that both of us are interested in a world of excellence and care and love and uh, genuine connection. And so, although we disagree on how to get there, we connect deeply on this like sort of intense passion for humanity. And I mean, I think that's the biggest thing I vet for is really like you have to be passionate and clear about how you envision the future, how you envision us as a group, and yeah, like how you're gonna get there. Because I have an issue with this sort of like wishy washy, um, sort of really fragile way of sort of seeking quote unquote peace. I think a lot of people are like pro peace, but really unclear about what they view as a peaceful world and how they believe we can find a peaceful world. How about you? Like, what is your sort of gauge of friendship and who belongs in your life and who doesn't?
A really big thing for me is just kind of a shared relationship to reality.
Mm.
Because people have all these different ways that you can form a relationship with reality. And like Fox News is one sort of bubble of reality. The front page of Reddit is another bubble of reality. I'm looking for people who have a kind of deep connection to like natural reality, to the natural world, people who want to celebrate all the beautiful things around us. I'm not really looking to be around people who want to like scold and shame and kind of just like resent all these things all the time. And there's a
Mm.
lot of resentment in the mainstream culture towards all sorts of different groups of people. And it's very draining to be around resentment and resentful people. So that's one of the
Mm.
biggest things that I've been filtering for is I want to be around people who like are really drawn towards truth and beauty and goodness and are like actively working to live a life that really to create a life that reflects a beautiful vision of heaven on earth. And their vision doesn't have to be the same as mine, but um, we have to both be working towards beauty, towards something beautiful.
Totally. I would say that like right now the biggest red flag for me when it comes to like inviting people into my world are people who believe that like the world is doomed. Um or yeah, people I the apocalypse thing really gets to me a lot.
It's
Where
kind of surreal. I was on a walk with some family friends the other day, and it's a beautiful day. It's a beautiful day in like May, in normal summertime weather. And
Mhm.
they were saying, like, we were talking about how beautiful the day was, and they're like, yeah, it's probably because of like climate change. And I didn't know how to react because I'm like, it's springtime, it's summertime. It's like this is normal weather. in the Bay Area of California. Like we don't need to do the doom and gloom ritual.
Yeah. Yeah. This like tendency towards hopelessness, you know? I mean, it makes me so sad, but it's also like, I can't let that leak into my life. It doesn't help those of us who are interested in creating a better world get there, right? It kind of just distracts from the goal. Um, that's not to say that like there is no, like we should just like blindly ignore reality, but also, yeah, like is pointing out this reality beneficial to anybody? And I would say that choosing to think about climate change over the beauty of the world is a bad choice.
Terrible. One of the worst
Terrible
trade
choice.
deals you could make.
Yeah. Yeah, and they're doing it so freely, you know. It's
Yeah.
like they didn't even think about it. It's hard to watch.
Imagine how stupid they're all going to look too when there's like some crazy technological breakthrough and it just is a total like non-factor going
Yeah.
forward. Like that's a very real possibility that we just hit some kind of technological breakthrough and suddenly it's not even a concern. It
Yeah.
just drops off the map completely.
I think about that with plastic a lot, where obviously I do my best to avoid plastic because I don't think it's good for the world as it is right now. But there could be a fungi that totally obliterates plastic at some point. And at that point, I'll just be like, okay, cool. Like, life has moved on from that thing and I don't have to worry about it anymore. Like, things can change at any moment. And so, this like obsession with like being able to predict the future, this is why I stopped looking really intensely at astrology because it was like I was so obsessed with trying to predict the future and it was stupid. It was like things are going to change in ways that I can't even imagine. And there's no use in trying to predict what will happen to me based off the little information that I have right now.
That's so true. I think people really underestimate how much what they believe and what they focus on is a choice.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of uncertainty and ambiguity in the world, and that kind of gives you an opening in the door to decide like, do I want to like pick the more negative and kind of like restrictive option, or do I want to like pick something that might be a little bit more open to the good, something that's more expansive, something that is more empowering personally. I think optimistic people have a really lovely energy to be around because um, they make you feel okay. They make you feel safe and secure. An optimistic person is going to tell you the glass is half full, it's not half empty, and that it's not a problem if you spill some milk. We'll mop it up and buy some more milk. There's plenty of milk, plenty of cows.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that seems to be like a trap that people who are overly inclusive tend to get into, where they kind of have this like scarcity mindset around belonging, where they think that if they forfeit any opportunity for belonging, they like will not belong. When in reality, if they like vet for certain traits, they'll actually feel a greater sense of belonging than if they were hanging out with people they didn't like. Um, and yeah, they think there's like this like terrible feeling of obligation around socializing that I think they get trapped into. And they it's really crazy when you like tell them like you can just say no, and they're so trapped in the mental state of like, but I have to, that they like totally forget that they have free will around relationships and that they're not simply sort of like being tethered by the social dynamics.
It's very, very important to remember that you have free will and that you can say no to things and say no to people. And the more, the more like social status or like perceived power or like resources you have, the more people are going to want to be around you and want to sort of like I don't want to say like drain your resources and energy, but they're going to want to like, they're going to want to be around you. They're going to want
Mhm.
to take your time and attention. And if you aren't able to say no, you're just going to be like um, a big fat corpse for vampires.
Yeah. You're going to be preyed upon for sure. It's it's a really dangerous position to be in. And I think a lot of people who are really good at making false connections end up in that position where they end up in this like sort of position of power because they have a lot of social pull and popularity. And then people start sort of preying upon that and they start to feel victimized because they're like, everybody wants something from me. And it's like, well, you sort of created this hell on your own by not being clear about who you wanted to spend your time with and what you wanted. Um, and so, yeah, now you're kind of like living in the hell of your own making, you know?
Yeah. And when you're living in the hell of your own making, maybe all you have to do is turn around and walk back. Like,
Yeah.
just don't keep walking down into the hell of your own making.
Yeah. And certainly don't sit down and scream to the heavens, why? You know, that's maybe the most useless thing that one can do.
That's the activist mindset is you sit down and you start screaming for someone else to solve the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why protesting statistically doesn't work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Amen, sister.
What does exclusion protect us from, Matt?
I think there's so many things that exclusion protects us from. One of the just most basic things it protects us from is that some people are actually bad.
Oh,
There are
yeah.
people who are genuinely malicious. And if you are around a person who is genuinely malicious, they are going to make your life much, much worse. They are going to fuck it up. You need to get away from them. You need to create distance between yourself and them. I actually went to high school with this guy who was an actual pathological liar. And it's not like he was like lying about like just things that would make him look good or that there's like a logical ulterior motive for his lying. He would just lie about things that because he couldn't help himself from lying about things. And it took our friend group like a while to kind of realize like, oh, like that's what's going on. Because we had all these like little like conflicts and dramas and things going on that were all sort of like triangulating through this one person who was a pathological liar. And when you're on the other side of that manipulation, you don't realize it right away a lot of the time. And once you do realize it, you're like, oh my God, like we've all been getting manipulated in this same way by the same person. And suddenly it's like the sun rising over the mountains on a cloudy day. You have clarity and you understand what's going on and you're like, oh my God, like we didn't need to like be mad at each other for like all of junior year. Like we didn't do anything bad to each other. Like we
Yeah,
didn't
this person was just totally puppeteering our whole friend group.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that's that like once you learn that there's people like that in the world, um that enables you to be on guard for other people like that. And so much of the world we're raised in culturally is this idea that every single person is de facto good. And if they're not a good person, it's not their fault. It's because they're in the wrong environment or something. Um, and I have a lot of pushback on that idea. I think that people are genuine moral actors with genuine moral agency and there are bad people out there and you need to exclude bad people from your life.
Yeah, I totally agree. I also, I have just like the general spiritual framework that like bad people are like a necessity in balancing the earthly realm. So like I just believe that there are bad people and that they like were sent here to be bad and to do bad things and to get away with those bad things and like not reap consequences. I wish that that weren't the case, but I just have like a general belief that like that sort of keeps the balance in the world. But as people that are seeking goodness, we have to be really discerning about not allowing the sort of morally bad folks to like infiltrate our groups, because they also seem like super, as you know, I grew up like around a group of people that were like very deceptive, and sort of similar to your pathological liar friend, in the fact that they were really power hungry and very interested in, I think they were probably too smart for their own good and became these sort of puppeteers as a sort of product of just boredom, to be honest. And that became their like extracurricular activity. But the problem is that they're super power hungry types. And so if they see like a naive group of people who are seeking goodness, they have a tendency to like want to take over that group and then sort of like, yeah, puppeteer that group. And so yeah, it just makes, it's like a very intense vulnerability. And yeah, I mean, I believe that there are bad people in this world who are just bad. And I know that too, because I've been around people who grew up in horrific environments, who are incredible people and just so conscious. And so I just don't believe it, because I've met so many people who are good despite their circumstances.
There's something about how you're letting your own perception and experiences of reality overtake the social narrative. And I feel like that's a very powerful thing that you've just identified, because
Yeah.
reality is what reality is. It's not the layer of social and cultural storytelling that we sort of plop down on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
Reality is what's real.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I also wonder, I might go on like a little bit of a psychoanalysis tangent here, but I wonder if the people who are obsessed with creating excuses for people who commit bad behavior, if they are worried that they themselves might be bad. And so they're doing it as sort of like a defensive response to this sort of like internal concern and this panic about possibly being a bad person. That might be a projection on my part, because I certainly was more forgiving of people when I was really worried that I might be bad inherently, and I felt that I couldn't control how I behaved. And so I used my past as an excuse to ground myself and feel safe, from like some sort of like internal moral panic. When in reality, there are people who just don't care, who are just they do bad things and they genuinely don't care about the consequences. And I think that a lot of people can't imagine having that internal framework.
We don't have good theory of mind for the vastness of the human condition in the mainstream culture. Like, we don't have theory of mind for a guy who like wakes up and just like randomly like stabs someone or pushes them onto the subway tracks because they're
Mm-hmm.
bored. It's like something to do.
Yeah. It's really hard to imagine being a person like that. And I think that people who, that's actually going back to your identifying people who identify as empaths as dangerous. That's really where it comes in, because they're so obsessed with more than understanding, but excusing people who do bad things. And I think there's also just like sort of a unspoken debate between people who see actions and effects as more significant than intention and reason. You know, I think you and I are certainly like action and effects people. Are the way that something manifests is more important to us than the intention it was uh, produced from.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't be upset if the greediest person in the world doing things that made them personally rich also made life better for all of us. I would be
Right,
very happy with that outcome.
right.
And on the flip side, I have very low patience and respect for someone who has the best intentions in the world, but is creating a genuinely bad set of material circumstances for us in society.
Yeah.
Because the intentions really don't matter when it comes to what's going on in the world. It's all about what's actually happening.
Yeah, that does seem to be like sort of the difference in people who sort of like favor the spirit psychological realm versus people who like are actually into like the material world and reality, and like see it as something real and significant. Because that is a difference that I think I have with a lot of like spiritualists is that they sort of like lose track of material reality as valuable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've established that exclusion can protect you from bad people and from actually malicious people. I have a follow up question, which
Hmm.
is there such thing as a loser, Shelby?
If there is, it's a self identification then more than it is like a reflection of reality. Right. I think that maybe, what? We said that there are bad people in the world. And so I think that the bad people, the people who choose repeatedly to do bad things, are losers in a sense. But I also think that we all have free will and choice and can redeem ourselves and be born anew simply by deciding to be different. And in that sense, none of us are losers unless we decide that we are. Uh, what do you think?
I think there are two kind of different extreme philosophies about what it means to be a loser. And one of those philosophies is that if you are a loser, that is a fixed and essential nature of your spirit, and there's nothing you can do to change it. You're always going to be a loser. And then on the flip side is and this is kind of what you see in like Hollywood and the mainstream culture a lot, is that there's no such thing as a loser. Everyone is a beautiful, precious, valuable, amazing person, no matter what they do or how they live their life. And I think the truth lies somewhere in the middle. I definitely think that being a loser is not a fixed condition, and that oftentimes being a loser can be what leads you into greatness. It inspires you to like change your life if you have to look in the mirror and be like, you know what, this is not it. This
Mm-hmm.
way that I'm spending my time and living my life and the trajectory I'm on, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, we take it too far if we think there's no such thing as a loser, and we think that how people spend their time like doesn't matter. Um, I think that there are a lot of people who really choose like frictionlessness and convenience, and this when I say this, I'm not really like casting a judgment down on them and saying that I'm superior to them, because I've done that myself countless times in my life. I think the desire to respond to frictionlessness and convenience is like baked into the human condition and baked into human nature. And we have a society full of frictionlessness and convenience. You
Mm.
think about DoorDash, you can pay someone to bring you food so you don't have to learn how to cook or clean up after yourself,
Or
um,
drive to the place to pick it up.
or drive 10 minutes to the place to pick it up. Um, we've got pornography so that you don't actually have to like get a woman interested in you in order to have sexual gratification as a man. We've got video games so that you can have a simulated sense of achievement. There's all these things that are simulating something
Mhm.
real. And many people just kind of like fall into how effortless and convenient and easy that is. I even think, people watch these like reality TV shows and like sitcoms, and all of those things are creating a illusion of socializing. Like
Mm.
you feel like you're in a group when you're watching Love Island or something like that.
Oh
And
yeah.
you're forming these like relationships and judgments in your mind with these people who kind of like aren't real. And the whole thing is like unreal,
Hmm.
but it still feels kind of real from your perspective as an individual,
Oh yeah.
and it's dangerous.
I remember my peak loser experience when I was at my most loser. I was like smoking weed all day and like sleeping at my mom's house. That was literally like I spent months just like at my mom's house sleeping and smoking weed. And I used to watch that 70s show all day long, and then it ended. And I remember being like literally crying because I was like, I miss them. I was like, I miss, I miss the friend group that I'm not a part of, but have been watching for hours every day. And it was certainly a wake up call, but for many people, it wouldn't be.
That's I think that's the dynamic is like, do you answer the wake up call?
Yeah.
Because you don't have to.
Yeah.
That's
No,
the
you
thing.
certainly don't. You actually can spend your whole life not answering that call. Um, Out of, I don't know, fear or maybe just ignorance too. I think some people might just not even think that they don't even realize that the phone's ringing, you know? Mm.
I'm thinking about my own experience of like being a peak loser, and it was just like I would get like drunk or high and like play video games like all
Yeah.
day, and it's like that's
Yeah.
not a good way to spend your time.
The sitting on your butt all day thing really gets me now. Now that I've like exited that state of being, I can feel when I'm like sinking into the couch and it's like becoming a part of my body. And it feels like a really dangerous place to be now. And to be fair, I think it was always a dangerous place to be. And I think I knew that it was a dangerous place to be when it was happening because I remember just feeling so uncomfortable. Like I could never find comfort. And it was because I like wasn't using my body in any way.
Something that like strength training and exercising really like opens your eyes to is just like how good it feels to be like moving and healthy and strong.
Mm-hmm.
And that I think in itself is maybe like a good medium for people to get to that wake up call moment, because
Yeah,
once you've had that, you don't want to you don't want to lose it, you don't want to let it go.
totally. How much your body needs you. Um, but going back to groups, you wrote in our notes, exclusion protects the group from people with bad ideas as vectors for social contagion. And I'm wondering what you mean by that and if you could talk about that more.
There's a lot of um dangerous ideas in the world, maybe. I'm going to throw out like eating disorders, anorexia, self-harm, and a lot of just maybe the general like over attachment people have to sort of like psychiatric diagnoses, or even like psychiatric conditions that they're self-diagnosing,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of people feel this sense of relief about like, oh, like there's nothing wrong with me, I just have a condition, and the condition like perfectly explains all these like frictions or like unhappiness in my life. And if you let those ideas kind of take over you, it can be a very disempowering thing. It can be something that um, kind of removes your sense of agency, removes your sense of like self power. It stops you from being able to move beyond the condition that you've sort of identified yourself with too. And I think that's very dangerous. Like identity, if you make your identity being mentally ill, you are going to feel and act and think mentally unwell things more often. And if you have the opposite orientation where you're like, you know, maybe I do have this condition or have some like limitation or challenge, but everyone has that. That's part of being a human. And I'm not going to hold that identity tightly. I'm just going to do my best and focus on the things that I can control and try to be as healthy and strong as I can. That really opens a door for change, positive change.
Totally. I feel such like a personal connection to this idea. I think I've said this before, but like the most significant thing a therapist ever said to me was, there is nothing wrong with you. I had spent 10 years trying to figure out what the right diagnosis was. I had been told that I was like a bunch of different things. And ultimately, the answer was that I was experiencing the human condition, and I had had like very traumatic experiences early in my life and was lost as to who I was. But like what I was experiencing was the human condition. It was not mental illness. And trying to look for the diagnosis took me so far away from myself, and identifying with mental illness became a trap to staying mentally ill in a way that I mean, like, I wouldn't wish upon anybody. And I think that that was a big danger about the 2010s, even early 2020s sort of psychiatric bullshit that was all mental illness is a result of a chemical imbalance, which was just a theory, by the way. And also the source of the chemical imbalance was never like discussed or researched. So people were assuming that what they meant was genetics. And the reality is that they were like, no, we're just like assuming that there's a chemical imbalance in your brain, and that's why we're giving you psychiatric medications. But people identified with like this sort of like genetic disease sort of perception of their mental health. And it became like this pervasive self-identity with like being incurable, with being there's permanently something wrong with you that will never be fixed and will never be resolved. And it's just like fully not true. And I can tell you that as somebody who bought into that idea, that it like doesn't exist. And the fact that I was surrounded by a bunch of people who identified as mentally ill totally reinforced this idea of myself, that I was unfixable, and don't get me wrong, I think that life is unfixable and should not be tried to like be fixed. You know, there is no cure for the human condition, for the human experience. There are tools to get through it.
You're gonna experience suffering and hardship and pain and heartbreak.
The suffering is the meat. Like, you want it. Trust me. And trying to avoid it is going to keep you so stagnant. And I was telling this to a friend the other day who, she's such a great light worker, but I'm such like a shadow worker. And she was like, I'm a little nervous about my darkness. And I was like, I really should get more into light work, but I have found such just gratitude and joy in learning how to integrate my darkness. It has been like the most fulfilling experience. And, joining groups that are interested in avoiding that or numbing that is like, to me, life destroying. But yeah, it's a big danger to identify, I think, with anything too negative's not the right word, but like permanent, maybe.
Yeah, things that are it's quite an assumption to believe that something is bad and it's going to be bad forever. About yourself. Like, that's a very limiting belief. That's a very So that's the sort of thing that's going to become a self-fulfilling prophecy the longer and tighter you hold on to it. And the longer you hold on to it, the harder it is to let go of it because you've been holding it so long that you would start to feel the sense of like guilt or shame about the fact that you actually could have set that belief down a while ago.
Yeah. Yeah. There was so much grief when she said that to me, when my therapist like finally like revealed that to me and I could like take it in really. And because she also is qualified to diagnose people. And so we'd worked together long enough for her to really be able to be like, I don't see any sort of indication of a direct mental illness. And I just remember her saying it and just crying. One, because it was like relieving, but also because it was like really scary. Because I was going to have to like figure out who I really was and stop allowing the DSM-5 to tell me who I was and how I was going to behave and how I should behave. And like, I had to stop using therapeutic tools as like a calculation of what a healthy person does. And I had to just like start being myself. And it was like excruciating.
This is kind of why I'm a big proponent of like excluding the default culture pretty like ruthlessly in your life, because the mainstream culture has so much orientation towards like the psychiatric approach to mental illnesses and kind of diagnose everything. And it's a very dangerous thing to like give too much space in your heart and mind, because social groups really do set the tone for like so many things in life. And if your social group is telling you that everyone, if your social group is a bunch of people who have conditions and talk about like how their condition is making them like miserable all the time and that life is really hard and we're all just going to be like miserable together, that is not an empowering place to be. And
Yeah.
that's the sort of place where if you imagine someone like genuinely getting better and no longer identifying with like the mental illness or the suffering, that the other people in the group are not going to respond well to that, because that is sort of an existential threat to their own self-conception. This is kind of the crabs in a bucket thing. It's you can't let one crab out of the bucket because that shows that escape is possible.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you've had similar experiences getting sober, but like the way I had to dismantle my community when I figured out that I wasn't permanently sick was really painful. Like everything about my life had to be reorganized because I had built an entire life around my identification with illness. And there were parts of my life that I got to keep. I think there were some people in my life who had seen that I wasn't a mentally ill person and they weren't mentally ill. I didn't always feel super like I belonged with them. But now I feel like I have a real sense of belonging with them because I saw what they saw in me, which was like not a sick person, but like a person that had gone through a lot and like was coming out of it and that they were like excited to meet. And then now our relationship is like flourishing because we're all sort of on this mission of finding the symbolism in our lives and learning to work with it and bringing that into the world.
That's so beautiful, and I'm so glad that that happened for you.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's such an intense trade-off to make when you're forced to choose between the sort of the known world of the social relationships you have and the change that you want to make. Sobriety for me required letting go of a lot of old relationships, and that required accepting that those people and their values were not in alignment with my life and where I want to go. And there's something, it's very easy to feel like a sense of scarcity around that, to let
Yeah.
go of a relationship. But whenever you let go of something or whenever you lose something, you don't realize it. We don't really, we're not wired to feel this. But you're also gaining space for possibilities and for
Mm-hmm.
more aligned relationships. So I think trust the universe. If you're holding on to something, like if you're listening to this and you're holding on to something that you don't feel good about holding on to, like let it go. Trust that something better and more beautiful will come in its place, because it will.
Yeah.
The universe loves people who create space for love and goodness and
Mhm.
possibility.
I want to talk about inclusion now, because there is something wonderful about inclusion. We don't need to exclude everybody. We'd be really lonely if we did. Um, and I'm curious when you think it is important to include outside of your normal parameters.
I think inclusivity ties really nicely into our conversation about world expansion from
Mm-hmm.
the other week, because inclusivity and including outsiders, or like meeting outsiders where they are, that's fundamentally a world expanding act. You're going to be exposed to new people and new ideas when you include people that you like wouldn't already like normally be including. So inclusivity, it gives you a ton of opportunities for like personal growth. It also gives you the potential for your group to be enriched by the addition of the outsider.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have a group that is designed to be like open, I think it's very important to just sort of like let whoever wants to show up show up. Um, there's something about like, if you're, a church doesn't turn people away. You pretty much can't get kicked out of church unless you're disrupting the proceedings, but otherwise they're going to let you walk in and sit down.
Yeah.
That's how church works. And I think a lot of good and sort of like healthy functioning social rituals and spiritual rituals in the modern world should function like that. I think that you can have like a weekly meeting group for people who have some sort of an interest, and let whoever shows up show up. You can always kick someone out if they're causing a genuine disruption. And that
Mm-hmm.
sort of is when you get back to like exclusion as protecting the group. But otherwise, it's so costly, like kind of just from like a cognitive and social effort standpoint and scheduling standpoint, to try to like protect your group from outsiders. Um, that there is, I think, a lot to the like the more the merrier approach
Mm-hmm.
for kind of like casual, social groups. I'm not talking so much about like families and the deeper ties and romantic relationships, but for casual social groups, inclusivity is like really good, I think.
Yeah. And like mass community, like proximity community, where it's like we're all living in the same neighborhood. It's like I think that there's like a really great value to like just that kind of exposure. Obviously, like you don't have to like invite them into your personal circle, but like gaining exposure of people who are just in proximity to you, I think is like genuinely valuable. Um, one for feeling safe, and two for like understanding the sort of energetic dynamic that's going on around you, and the diversity of thought that's going on around you. You know, I think that inclusion, including outside of your normal parameters, really protects from echo chambers. And that's sort of the balance, right? Is that we don't want people who are just like repeating what we say, like parroting us all of the time, because it keeps us from questioning ourselves. It keeps us from questioning our thought processes. And so we have to have like some diversity of thought, and like just having the exposure to it. You don't have to like constantly invite it, but like to like totally shut it out from your life, I think is really dangerous to your psyche and also to your ego. Just like, I think a lot of people end up in this place where they're like, I'm correct in thinking this way because I'm surrounded by a bunch of other people who are thinking this way. And when they're approached by somebody who thinks differently, they are like, well, we are the majority. You are the minority in my life, and therefore you are wrong. And yeah, it's a really dangerous place to be. So I think it's like, it's really good to just have exposure more than it is to like invite into your personal group.
There's both wisdom and madness in crowds, and that's a beautiful and dangerous paradox.
So where is the boundary between conscious inclusion and infiltration?
So infiltration meaning kind of like somebody is infiltrating your group and
Yeah.
taking
Where
advantage,
like,
maybe.
yeah, maybe somebody who doesn't belong in the group sort of finds their way into your group, and you aren't sure either how they got there or like why they're being sort of like allowed in the group, and where the boundary lies between their inclusion in the group and whether they're sort of just like falling into the group, right?
I think it really comes down to the group health, and the group as kind of an organism, because groups, what makes them great is that they're bigger than the individual. And one of the things that people love to experience out of groups is when the group turns its attention onto them as an individual. And that makes you feel like kind of powerful. It makes you feel included. It makes you feel valued. But this is a dangerous thing in and of itself, because a group might not function if it spends too long looking at individuals. And you can imagine that there might be like a creative, let's say like a creative writing group, and someone shows up and they're not very serious about the work, and really they want to have an outlet to just complain about their personal life. And they start taking up all the airtime in the meetings, just complaining about their personal life. The group is going to be harmed by that, and the group is not going to be able to function in its purpose if that happens. And that's when you get to the group as an organism. It's like, that's the boundary, I think, between inclusion, conscious inclusion, and infiltration. Is if the group is dying because of that inclusion, that's infiltration. That is
Totally.
you might say, virus that needs to be. You need to have antibodies for it.
I was going to say, I never want to frame a person as a disease, but I think in terms of like the function of group dynamics, have you ever had somebody who, I've actually been this person before. Have you ever had somebody in a group who, like, whenever they say something, it sort of like feels like an interruption into the flow of the conversation? That to me is like, that to me is sort of like an infection, right? Where it's like you're sort of like cutting off the flow of the dynamic, and it just is an indication that you don't belong there. It's nothing personal.
Right.
Simultaneously, I think that sometimes when we have too many people who are similar to each other, there can be sort of a stagnation in conversation and a lack of growth. And to me, that's where conscious inclusion is important, where we're like, we actually need somebody who is different from us to like appear in this dynamic, because we need some imagination and some creativity, and we need someone to inspire newness in the group. And so, yeah, I think that you can be intentional and say, like, I'm going to include someone who maybe wouldn't normally fit, or we didn't know we aren't sure will fit. And then sometimes they can bring like a new, like they can bring a richness and a newness to the dynamic.
That's something I think very, very important, that infusion of fresh blood and fresh energy. I've
Mm-hmm.
noticed in the world we're in online, posting on Twitter, that there's very much kind of this cyclical thing that happens where there's groups of kind of young, energized, active posters who sort of all like rise up together and
Mm-hmm.
build, audiences, create followings, just by expressing themselves and their energy, and people like really like respond to that. And as those cohorts kind of mature, they become a little bit more like settled and familiar and less maybe surprising, less dynamic. And the cycle repeats, and you'll have new cohorts coming up where the old cohorts are kind of like, oh, look at this, like fresh blood. It's so exciting to see like the energy and the good new voices again. It gets everyone fired up to kind of keep engaging.
Yeah, I love that about our part of Twitter too, is that the people, there's a very little scarcity mindset in the discussion because everyone is so excited to talk about something that they haven't thought about before. And so even the people with like really high follower counts and that have maybe sort of like had their popularity and are now sort of like plateauing in like thought, they're super excited to engage with lower following but new ideas, sort of accounts that are just coming up. They're hungry for new discussion, which I like. I think we're coming to a close, but I want to uh, talk about inclusion in terms of invitation and the sacredness of invitation. And why should we want to be exclusively invited?
I think it fundamentally means something to be chosen. I think a relationship, or a group dynamic where the people are being carefully curated and carefully invited because of shared alignment or similar like orientations towards the world. I think that's a very special thing. I think that's something that creates special experiences. Um, there's this thing that can happen where, let's say, I mean, let's take a few steps back.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that you're giving invitations fundamentally means you're participating in an active exclusion. It tells you that it's a closed event or a closed experience. It's not open for everyone. Um, the fundamental nature of like an open group is that it is a little dangerous and can be ruined by someone with bad vibes. And groups that are invitation based are a lot less likely to have this problem. Not always, but as a sort of fundamental thing, you've got that extra layer of selection working against a lot of bad outcomes. So to be invited to something is kind of sacred. It's a choice. No one like forced you to invite that person. And it's nice to be like genuinely included and genuinely valued in a social group. It's like that feels very good for the people involved.
Mm-hmm.
And I think on the kind of other side of it, um, putting together a good like invite list for a group or experience is a very satisfying act of creation.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's a genuine joy to host a good event and to make a good experience for people you love and care about.
Yeah. I think it builds trust too when you're good at being discerning about who gets invited into the group and uh, basing it on who you already like, the vibe you're sort of trying to curate, because um, you don't want to. Sometimes we can have really diverse friendships, and some people aren't always going to fit with other people. So, like, I'm really against the idea of just like inviting everyone to the same party. Sometimes there's certain circumstances where that's a good idea, but for the most part, If I'm throwing a party, I am curating a vibe, and not all of the people that I know are going to vibe with each other. And so I have to base the invitation off of like who I think will get along with each other and who I want to connect with each other. I love this is like I think one of my skills is that figuring out who would vibe with each other, and like I've always had this like ability, and it has nipped me in the bud before, or it's kind of like come back to bite me, I should say. Um, but I have the skill where I know that two people that I've met would be friends. And I have this habit of introducing those people and then them like becoming best friends. And yeah, to me, that's one, like just a good skill to have if you're throwing a party, but it's also like you're creating a container for people to like express themselves and socialize and like connect. And if you're going to create a container, like it better be really specific and clear. And yeah, I think it just really builds trust when you have a person who you're like, oh, I know that when I go to this person's party, it's only going to be amazing vibes, that it's like made for me. And so you want them to be like excited to have the invitation. And it's kind of like we were talking about before. You don't want to belong to every group. You want to belong to a group that is right for you. And if you're being exclusively invited, then that sort of is a signal that like this is the group that wants you.
I was just thinking about how this like idea of sort of selectively inviting people requires like being able to discern what their values are and what their vision of like heaven on earth is. And a party is really just like a little tiny slice of heaven on earth, right?
Yes, a good one.
And I can see why this is like such a fun game for you to get to like think about your friends and what their values are and kind of like how the energy would fit together. Very addicting. There's a lot to
Yeah.
think about.
And you get to really like protect their time, you know? Like to me, it's really curating a party is really about valuing other people's time. And I have a obsession with valuing people's time. That's why I'm very punctual. Because
Are you
I'm just
subtweeting me right now, Shelby?
maybe a little bit. But
Yeah.
you're never more than 5 minutes late. So that's a reasonable amount
Yeah.
of lateness. But I'm maybe obsessively punctual. It's just a part of my makeup, I think. And it's because I really, really value people's time. And so if I'm going to throw a party, if I'm going to make you spend a Friday night with me, like I'm going to make sure that you like the people there, that you feel good in the environment, that you are well fed, and that you feel taken care of.
Beautiful.
I
Okay.
think that that's actually a great segue into like the garden metaphor, because I think that a party can be the garden too.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
I think both of us agree that like the a group of people is kind of like a garden. Um and the most well-preserved gardens that flourish always have a fence and a gate to protect from critters that are going to come munch on it, or from people who are going to disrespect it and maybe step all over it. And it's ultimately in the preservation of resources and of beauty, right? When we create a garden, we want it to be beautiful, but we also want it to be really useful and supportive to our longevity and our wellness. And so creating a good group is like planting a garden. Um, and I at least think that the fence is really necessary.
The way gardens are ecosystems with lots of different elements to it, and those elements need to be balanced and kind of in like a fluid state of equilibrium with each other.
Mm-hmm.
I totally agree about like gates and fences. There's a reason that we put those like little things, those little sensors around our herbs that kind of make the beeping that drives away squirrels and stuff like that.
Yep.
And ultimately, a garden is like unified around a shared goal or purpose of like life and beauty, I would say is what a garden is oriented towards. And a good party, I think, is oriented towards the same things.
Yes. Yeah. And, we included weeding and symbiosis. And ultimately, if you have like an invasive species or an excess amount of weeds, like the plants will die. They'll get gobbled up. And so that's, I think, where exclusion comes in beyond the fencing, which is that like there will be people who try to infiltrate that garden and infiltrate that group. You have to be really conscious to remove them kindly and correctly and in a way that is protective of the integrity of the group. And because ultimately, like, we all have to, if we're in a group, we all have to serve each other, right? We can't just take. And so we have to be mutually beneficial. And when there's people who come into our groups who just want to gobble up the goodness.
Yeah.
And that's not a safe person.
I mean, fundamentally, if a group is not made up of people who are serving the group instead of serving the individual, it will not be sustainable and it will die.
Yep. Yeah. Beautiful.
Yes. So exclusion, that's how you make a good garden. You can't throw plants in willy-nilly. Some roots are gonna compete for resources and choke each other out.
Yeah. Actually, now that I'm thinking about parties, I've really been thinking about wanting to create an exclusive Twitter party.
That would be fun. I hope I make the invite cut.
You make the invite cut. I won't say anyone else who does, but Matt's going to be invited.
Will coffee be involved? Coffee and gardens, ideally.
Yeah, dude. We got so many types of coffee. We got drip coffee. We got Bialetti. We got French press. We got all sorts of things.
I'm there.
If you like a matcha latte, I make a mean one. So.
Okay, I'm gonna hold you to that, my friend.
I'll make you one.
Beautiful. All right, take us home, Shelby.
Okay. Thank you for joining us this week, and we'll see you guys next week. I think that's all. That's all we have. Yeah.
Yep. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Thanks for listening, guys.